Today's guest on the Saltwater Edge podcast is a passionate, lifelong fisherman and a tough, salty bastard. But those are table stakes for being an effective fisheries advocate. Stirred in a deep respect for the past and unwavering ability to focus on fish first as our North Star, you get what I think is the best in the game. The American Saltwater Guide Association is a young organization founded in 2018 that has grown rapidly due to its core values of science, education, and advocacy. Today's guest conceived of an organization with a fish-first, science-based approach to fisheries management. He recruited me to serve as chairman, which has been some of the most gratifying work of my career. He is the rare combination of a patient strategist playing the long game and a very effective sales guy when he sees the right opportunity. Please welcome the 2024 Garden Gun Conservation Award winner, the ASGA President and Policy Director, and not everybody's cup of tea, Tony Friedrich. How are we doing, buddy?
Hey, good, man. How are you?
Yeah. You don't get to see the intro in advance, so so I get to poke a little fun.
Thanks for that.
You bet. You bet. I like to kind of get a sense, especially with somebody as passionate as you are, where that came from. I know you grew up, I think, in Tennessee or Louisiana or some combination, but where did that passion for fishing for you come from? And then how did it get salty if you were born inland, if you will?
Yeah. So, I came from a family of outdoorsmen. My maternal grandfather, so my mother's side of the family was from Tennessee. My father's side of the family was from Louisiana.
Okay.
So we lived in the far southwest corner of Tennessee. I was born in Memphis. And so that exposed me to like the White River, the Little Red River. My grandfather was, y'all can't see it because the background's blurred out, but I have his, this was the award, the Silver Cup was the award in 1927 for the Tennessee Skeet Shooting Championship.
Oh, nice.
And he's, he was something else. And where
a mentor and someone you respected a lot, obviously.
Oh, he was somebody you didn't mess with, and I just happened to be someone that he loved very much. My uncle was a big outdoorsman, and he was killed in the Air Force just before I was born, and that's my namesake. So, my grandmother and my grandfather, that was their only son. I was their only grandson.
I see.
So they just, immediately, I just turned into, that was the Italian side of the family, and I was the only boy left, and I benefited from, his experience in the outdoors. And then my other grandparents lived in Kenner, Louisiana, and I would go down there.
How far south is that? Is that saltwater, salty?
It's a suburb. It's a suburb of New Orleans.
I've heard of the place. I just didn't know where it was. Yeah.
Well, so it's right by the airport, right by the New Orleans airport. So I grew up fishing like Lake Pontchartrain in the summer when I would go visit them. I had a similar experience. It was my grandfather who taught me to fish, and it was in the summer. And I was like his little buddy, and I'd see the bunker coming down the beach, and I'd run over to his house. It'd take a half hour to amble out to the car and drive to the, it wasn't a fast operation, but I treasure those days. And his name's Wandell, and I know that my son's named Dell on account of that, named after him. But those grandfathers, man, they don't get much better than it sounds like yours or mine. What a treat. What a treat. Oh yeah, they were depression, they were depression people, and they were hard people. And but I told you once, like I was messing around with the donkey, and it kicked me, and I punched it because it kicked me. I was like 8 years old, and it blocked me in the potato cellar for like 6 hours because he told me not to mess with the donkey. So like I kind of grew up a little bit different than my son or kids these days. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I had a lot of time alone with my thoughts in the potato cellar.
It's called the penalty box now.
Yeah.
The So, and was what were you fishing for in there in the beginning? Was it?
Peter, we like the ponds and the lakes and the reservoirs. Like, we were right. Memphis is right at the beginning of the delta of the Mississippi River. Like
Oh, I didn't know
we
that.
are the delta. So
Yeah,
we had all the oxbow lakes. Like, so when the Corps of Engineers would move the river a little bit this way or that way, so it wouldn't flood so bad, we would fish those reservoirs. Like, probably the ones that I fished the most were like Arca Butler, Reelfoot Lake, Tunica, Sardis, Enid. And they were like crappie factories,
that's a
big
very
bat.
technical fishery too, right? I mean, they hang in the water column.
You know, it was funny. Blaine and I were talking this morning about
Mhm.
crappie. Blaine Chocolate. We were on the phone pretty early this morning, and it's you can catch a little crappie pretty easy, but to consistently catch big ones, you got to know what you're doing.
Yeah,
And yeah, I mean, there's an absolute science to it. You can catch them a million different ways. You catch them on structure in the grass. It depends on if they're on the spawn in the fall. They school up for winter. You
yeah.
know, s-
And aren't they
it,
often
what?
suspended in the water column too? So it's a little. I mean, they live in maybe a deep environment, but they can be suspended
Yeah, they can
thermal-wise,
be
right?
suspended. They can get way back into the brush too.
I see.
So it's interesting. Like if you don't live there, you're not from there, you don't realize this. But when I can remember, like, you know, I was 10 years old running a bass boat.
Mhm.
Like that was just I was backing the thing off the trailer, putting it on the trailer. Like I just grew up doing
Doing that.
that. I had my own John boat, so I can remember like backing the John boat up and looking down in the water. And I was like, holy smokes, like that's a traffic light. It was the traffic light in the parking lot, but I was fishing in the spring. So like,
Wow.
you see those pictures of those, 80-foot cypress trees that we all fished. That was one of the structures that we fished constantly for everything from catfish to bass to crappie. And you would be in the tops of the cypress trees in the summer. And I mean, in the spring, the lake could go up and down 40 foot.
Sure,
Um,
sure. Yeah.
depending on how much runoff the river got. So
The more I learn about it, uh, some of this stuff that I mean, I remember seeing like a crappie on the cover of In Fisherman magazine or something, going like, "What's the big deal?" Now, the more I learn, not just from you, but other conversations along the way, it is a big deal.
if you listen to our boys from Louisiana, there's regional names for everything,
Uh-huh.
and the regional name for a crappie in Louisiana is sac-a-lait, and that actually is French. It directly translates into bag of milk,
Hmm.
and that's the protein. Like the early settlers of Louisiana,
Ah,
that was like how valuable a crappie was.
no kidding.
Because it's just, I mean, to me, I'm not it's kind of like you ebb and flow in your life as a
Mhm.
fisherman. And when I was a little kid, man, I stacked the cooler even into my 20s, and I don't do it so much anymore. But there are very few freshwater fish that I look at and I'm like, you're dead. And a
Mine.
big crappie's one of them.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Um, you mentioned your grandfather is a mentor, and then we already Blaine's name's already come up, and I know you guys share a mentor in Lefty Kreh. And I want to make sure we covered this because I know you guys work together on your Tie-Fest program. But why don't you share with the audience here how you met him and what made him such a special guy?
I'm a pretty big believer in, things happen for a reason.
Damn right.
And I was just a kid. I was in my late 20s. I think at the time Blaine owned a fly shop in Roanoke, Virginia, and I was doing some conservation work in the Chesapeake. Um and
And that'd be
and I
Lefty's
was
home water, right? The Chesapeake. He was a Baltimore guy at this point, right? Baltimore
Yes.
Sun and stuff. Okay.
Yeah, he was. So I was doing a little bit of you know, starting to get involved for the first time in kind of Chesapeake Bay conservation, striped bass conservation. Lefty lived over in I think it was Cockeysville, Wickersham Drive in Cockeysville, but right around Towson, like that area. So he was kind of like around the Gunpowder, Western Run, great smallmouth, and he grew up in Frederick, which was like the Monocacy, and I was kind of on the other side of Maryland, focused on the Bay. So I had at the time, message boards were a big deal. They were just coming up. Your time with real time, it was the same thing going on, and groups of people were getting together to kind of share ideas. And I had this event at this little fly shop, and it was basically just like a get together for one of the message boards. And I was tying, and I had a food truck, and I was the kind of the shop that I
sounds like what they call a community event these days.
Yeah. And uh I was tying there. I was giving some casting lessons. I lived real close to the place, so they would just kind of call me to help out every once in a while. And I thought I was just thought I was the bee's knees, at 20 something years old. So we had this event, and like way more people showed up than we thought. I was figuring maybe like 20, 25 people, and man, there was like 100 people there. I mean, it was like the shop was like busted at the seams, and everybody's having a good time, and everybody's talking, and I'm sitting in this little corner, and I think it was funny. I think I was tying a gummy minnow, like one of Blaine's, one of Blaine's silly skin gummy minnows, and like the whole room just got quiet. And I was like, oh my God, like somebody, what's happened? Did the cops show up? Is the fire marshal here? And there's Lefty, like standing in the doorway. And
backlit
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, like just not a word in the place. And I just remember I just got up. I just got up out of the seat, and I was like, it's yours. Much that was the general reaction. Fly fishermen can be pretty arrogant and hoity-toity, but I'll tell you what, man, if he's gone now, and anyone who didn't get to experience when Lefty walked into a room, there was a lot of hands in pockets looking at your shoes. Shut up. The king had arrived. You know what I mean? So and that was just,
he earned it.
He earned it. He didn't act that way, but he earned it. So man, much to Lefty, much on brand for Lefty. I gave him the seat, and what did he do? He pulled another chair up and had me sit next to him, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is I'm rattled, like, and I don't get rattled easy.
It sounds like your first half hour meeting the guy.
I was like, man, I don't know what's going on, and I like messed the fly up, and he had this cackle laugh and this huge smile, and I was just, I had grown up when my grandfather passed away. That's how I kind of stayed in touch with fishing, because like it was Lefty's books and Lefty's videos, and until I was old enough to kind of find my way and kind of be a little bit more independent, that was like my connection left with with fishing. So having this guy actually sit next to me was just, it was every time he sat next to me was unbelievable. So anyway, the event clears out. I'm on like cloud nine. I'm sweeping up the place after everyone left. There's there's bucktail all over the floor, and little lead eyes in the vacuum cleaner. And I hear the toilet flush upstairs. The bathroom was upstairs at this place. And I figured it was just one of my friends that was going to come down and help me. And like, lo and behold, Lefty had stayed late. And I was like, what is this? And I remember I walked up the stairs, and he laughed at me, and he told me his hand was wet from washing his hand, and he promised me it wasn't pee. And I just remember sitting there thinking on the steps, like, this guy's something else. This guy's cooler than I imagined. And then he told me this story about like how he got into fly fishing, and how it was hard for him, and how he was a writer, and he ran the Met tournament in Miami, and came back up here, and then was the outdoor editor for the Sun, and had all these, had just moved the industry in a million different ways. And he basically said, that if I did a couple of things, that he would help me. Uh, he would help my, career if I wanted a career in fishing. And that was it.
Gave you his word kind of thing.
That was it.
Yeah.
Like at pretty much everything professionally from that moment forward has been, somehow related to keeping that promise to him.
Yeah. 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 Because I know,
And you know, Blaine's the same way.
right.
Bob Popovics was the same way. Lefty was a mentor of his. Clouser. I mean, just countless people in that coaching tree.
Yeah.
Um,
And it seems like in some ways, knowing somewhat about this myself, there were different assignments. I mean, he provided air cover a lot like the Guide Association does now for some thought leaders,
well,
that
people, you know, Peter,
that
people
take some
may
heat
not,
in the beginning.
yeah, people may not know this, but like Clouser took a ton of abuse for the Clouser. You know,
Yeah.
people said it
Like
was a
blasphemy.
jig.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Popovic's, holy
Plastic
moly.
flies or something, right?
When they called them Home Depot flies because he was using epoxy and
Epoxy.
stuff
Huh.
and just ridiculed the bejesus out of him. And Lefty was like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And even Blaine, when he showed Lefty his gummy minnow in the late 90s, um, Blaine was like, "Is this a fly?" And AJ, AJ, my son, Lefty happened to be on the board of IGFA. That's what I was trying to say, IGFA,
Yeah.
at the time. And Blaine's concern was like, when somebody catches a world's record on this, will IGFA consider it a fly? And Lefty just kind of winked at him with those like fighter pilot gray slate blue eyes, and he said, "I'm on the board. You don't have to worry about it. That's a fly."
Mm.
And it was just little stuff like that that he did.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, Peter, I cannot express enough that like when you elevate people and you think, these heroes are something special, and then you read something about them that they're really not a great person.
Yeah.
And Lefty was 1,000 times better than anyone could have imagined.
I just, with
And it's
Bob.
so hard for me to talk. I am, I don't know how I'm maintaining right now. It is so difficult for me to talk about this to this
Well,
day. So
I wrote a little blurb about Bob Popovics recently when he passed away in the last week or so. And I said, basically, not only was he a great fly tyer, he was an even better human. And one of the things I described was how he lifted other people up.
yeah.
And you're echoing the same thing from the guy who lifted him up,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So it's a
That's
chain.
the coaching tree.
It's literally a chain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Linked chain. Um,
Yeah.
and it was
Lefty's
great.
couple of
I tell you,
sayings.
there's something I didn't share with the public
Hmm.
that I was sent to me, and but it was the motivation behind that kind of idea of lifting people up and the grace that guy had. Um, and it was basically a shot from a book that he was working on. And your flies are here and there and everywhere. And he basically said, Popovic said some words to the effect that, um, please shine the light on the other guys.
Yeah.
I've had
Yeah.
plenty myself. You know what I mean? And they're what's next, right?
Yeah.
So, and that was just, I'm just stunned by the grace in that. When you see all the me these days on Instagram and other places, it was just stunning, and just to me was the guy I knew only a little bit, but it sounds like it's almost like a carbon copy.
Well, I'll tell you,
Of
Peter,
the
I'll
way
tell you two stories, because we were at the funeral, right? Well, we were at
Yep.
the wake. I didn't really feel right going to the funeral. I kind of thought that was for family. And
Mhm.
so we drove up this weekend or Monday because it was a holiday, and went to the wake. And there's two stories that I would like to share, and both of them are very short.
Love to
So there
hear
was
it.
the line for the viewing at the wake was probably 45 minutes, an hour long, just to get into the line. That's how many people were there. So, what a great thing about our community. People came from all over the place. And there was a lady standing in front of me, and you could tell she was pretty upset. And when you're in line with somebody for 45 minutes or so, me, like I can make friends with paint on a wall. I'm just a talker, and that's who I am. So I saw she was just wearing a Rangers fleece,
Ah,
and Bob was a huge Rangers fan. And so she kind of looked back at me, and she had tears in her eyes. And I said, "Let's go Rangers," just to try to make her, feel a little bit better. And she was like, Bob would Bob would text me that every morning. She's like, "I feel like you're an angel sent that I needed to hear that, because every morning before a Rangers game, Bob would text me that." And I said, "Well, how did you know him?" And she said, "I'm a waitress at Clee's." And
Ah,
that was Bob's favorite
that's where the
pizza
club
place.
meetings are. Yeah, yeah.
And she goes, "And I'm going to tell you something. This is how I know him." She said, Hurricane Sandy destroyed Cleese. And Bob came in and hired all of us.
Mm, wow.
Yeah. Hired all of them
All the
at his
staff from Please
restaurants.
to work at
Yeah.
his.
To get
Yeah.
them over the hump till they could rebuild Cleese.
Wow.
And then about an hour or two later, somebody came up with a story that Bob had been traveling back. I think he was pike fishing in Canada, and they were going through, customs to get back in the US to fly home. And there was a lady there who didn't speak English, and she was just, despondent, crying, and she had a baby with her. And nobody could understand, what her problem was. And Bob like walked out of line, like consoled her, went around the airport, found somebody who could understand her, she had missed her flight. He got her on the next plane. He waited with her the entire time until she knew that she was safe, walked her to the next gate. And that's just, I think those stories need to be, because like
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Nobody's looking.
Yeah.
Nobody's nobody's gonna uh, it's not like you got cameras on you and you have to act a certain way. Like that's just how he was. Like he
Well,
just stopped everything, dropped everything, saw a woman with a baby
right.
that he felt, somebody needed to step up and help.
That's there's a quote. It's something about the measure of a man is, or maybe everybody, I would say, is what do you do when no one's looking, right? And it sounds like that's a story from when no one was looking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Incredible people.
absolutely, quite a few mentors, grandfathers, and more. Um, you know, Lefty kind of, I wouldn't say, you said everything on your career, since then, probably had Lefty's handprint on it. I know you spent a long time in fisheries management, so let's start to talk about that and effective advocacy. Um, personally, I've been a member of many different fisheries conservation organizations over the years, both fresh and saltwater. And I look at their effectiveness over the decades and the state of our fisheries currently. You see, at least I feel they have to be guilty by association in some way. What is broken, such that decades of work has produced kind of our current situation. And I'm talking freshwater, saltwater, but just generally, it seems to me that the advocacy work's being done by a few, and it doesn't always align with the desires of the many. And then the many being recreational anglers and maybe smaller manufacturers like Mike Hogan and stuff, or retailers like me. But also, I think inherent in fishing is we could take a lesson from the art of war. Divide and conquer. Because I always, when I'm giving my little stump speech, I'll always say that it's the surfcaster who's walking off the beach into the parking lot as the fly guy's putting on his stuff, and as the light tackle guy goes out the breachway. And they're all there for striped bass. They're all there for the same reason. They actually share this passion. And if we get these groups and other ones together, we'd have that big voice, so the many would have a voice that was commensurate with their economic impact, their size, their whatever the measurement you want to be, and I just see a lot of what happens. I don't know, bureaucracy or whatever. But so I got my chance to riff, sort it out a little. Maybe there's examples that doesn't need to be, but I mean, I think the one of the reasons for this regular and fast success of the Guide Association is the fact that the policies that you pursue as the policy director of the Guide Association really resonate with recreational anglers and make sense to businessmen like me.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, what I would feel comfortable commenting on that is, every single person that is an officer or a consultant or whatever has a role in the Guides Association is a real fisherman.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that comes with a lot of experience, a lot of time on the water. You know, unfortunately, I've probably spent a lot less time on the water since I, you know, have been building this thing. It sucks up pretty much most of my time besides
You're 27,
my
24/7
family. But that's okay. I'm not complaining. Like at a certain point, I think your mind shifts and you stop worrying about, you know, you caught a lot of fish. I'm not saying I've done it all, but
Right.
you know, I've been really lucky and I've got to go to beautiful places and catch amazing fish and, you know, just a very fortunate life like that. And at a certain point, you know, you kind of look at it and you're like, I should probably start doing good because look at what this has done for my life and, you know, my sanity. And like, what if this is not around? So I think, you know, and it's hard to really, it's hard to, I don't want to stereotype every group out there. That's not fair because there are some real
I
big,
agree with you.
there are some real big groups that work on, you know, freshwater issues that just do a great job. You know, there'd be a lot less fish without them.
Yeah.
You know, I think in anything, not just fisheries, in anything, when you build something, you know, beautiful, everyone else wants it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can't have it, they try to break it. You know, it's like a second grader coming in with the best, you know, science project in the class,
Yeah.
and a bully has a, you know,
This is it off the table.
Alka-Seltzer volcano and is pissed and knocks the other kid's thing off the table because he didn't do it. You know, it's kind of like there's a little bit of that, and then there's a little bit of like, not everyone, please, but you know, kind of like when you get so big, you got to feed the machine and then you start making compromises.
Right.
And when you make that compromise, you can never turn back. And I mean, Peter, you were on that call. If you want to, like, we can speak a little bit about this. I mean, you were on that call with me,
Mm-hmm.
and there were some incredibly wealthy individuals that were pitching us and going to give us a good amount of money. But it was pretty clear that the message was, we're going to give you this money, but you have to take orders from us. And my response was, you don't have enough money.
Right.
And
Right.
that individual had probably never heard that before.
Right.
And boy, did I catch some,
Compute.
did I catch some heat for that, right? I'm an idiot. I talk too much, blah, blah, blah. I'm a loud mouth, you know, what everyone says about me. But the point was, nobody else has the experience on that call that I had. And I saw the crossroads. And I was like, if I choose this easy crossroad, things are going to be different forever and we can never go back. And to me, that was worth telling that individual to take a hike.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough money that anyone can give us that is worth changing who we are.
Yeah. As it relates to being a distraction and also taking us off this true north, which you've been so good about, which is the fish first. You know, we always talk, you and I talk almost every day, sometimes more than that. But, you know, there's going to be a day where the science takes us someplace we might not be excited about as a retailer or as a manufacturer, as a fishing guide. But we've got the fish first as the North Star. And I think that's what, you know, you told me this was years ago. I can't remember the example, but, you know, if policy folks don't have that kind of North Star as an operating premise, they can get distracted, like we were talking about, lose their focus, or get all twisted up in their own words because something that they said 2 years ago, you know, they're like, yeah, but that was then, you know, and that's when I think one of the real strengths of the Guide Association is we've been, you know, dead ahead and focused. And I think also, you know, you can look at, you know, like Atlantic States Marine Fisheries, been around for a long time, produced this the shining star of fisheries management, which was to rebuild striped bass years ago. Right now, we're talking, we're almost at the other end of that continuum, and looking for ways to rebuild by 2029. And they're responsible for 26 species, and I think adding bluefish now, it's 17 of the 26 are overfished, depleted, or condition unknown. So
cobia, they co-manage bluefish, but cobia is the most
Noah,
recent.
right?
Cobia is the most recent victim.
Got it.
Of ASMFC management. So,
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't hire them.
Yeah.
So we got to do something to help the best of, and then you rightly say, and I always try to include this when I'm speaking about ASMFC. There's some excellent people there, hardworking, smart.
Oh yeah, the staff is fine.
Great ideas, right? It's just how it actually manifests hasn't been very effective.
The structure. It's kind of like going down that crossroad that I said before. Like you take the money and now it's over. Now you're beholden.
Because it used to be just scientists and fisheries guys, right?
Yeah, and then they changed, and the commissioners, like if you're on a council, you get like a stipend. You get money to attend the meetings, and it's almost like an hourly wage.
Yeah.
And because of that, and at an ASMFC, all they get is like reimbursements for travel, but they don't get paid for researching the stuff, being on a committee, going to special meetings, going above and beyond. There's nothing. And because of that, there's no term limits. On a council, you can only serve 3 consecutive terms. But on ASMFC, you have people sitting in those seats for 20, 30 years. And
each got 3, right? And one's but one's a political appointee. And that, I thought when you were starting to speak about stipends and things like that, you were going to mention the fact that a couple of years ago, like 10 or maybe more, they added a political appointee to each, which kind of took it out of like
the legislative proxy. It's a legislative proxy. And the bottom line is this, like I think that if we want the best commissioners out there, I would fully support, more funding for ASMFC to give them that same kind of hourly rate that you get on a council. Because like if you look at what the councils manage now, it's pales into comparison what the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission manages. And frankly, it's a lot more important species.
Yeah, exactly right.
Striped bass, redfish. I mean, come on, co-managed bluefish. There's 1, 2, 3.
You can look at it in the context of economic impact of each of those species, and it's billions of dollars.
Yeah, that's 1, 2, 3 for most fishing trips.
Yeah.
So, point here is like I would advocate for that in a heartbeat, because it would elevate the quality of commissioners that we have.
Yeah.
And it would make more people want to do it. Who can take off a week every 3 months and sit in fisheries meetings? Like I couldn't do that and have my family. And first of all, they'd never ask me. I mean, let's be honest.
That's not true.
I'm not getting an invite. Yeah, but that begs the question, like, why are the commissioners there?
Sure. So let's do this. Let me ask you a question. I recognize, and I want to hear a little bit about what makes what's the secret sauce, what makes ASGA's approach effective. And then maybe we'll hit some highlights of what's going on with a couple species.
Sure.
So this next generation has grown up with the internet and Zoom and social media and all that. And that's changed the game with advocacy. I tell people that COVID actually helped because it took a lot of meetings to Zoom, and you didn't have to get off of work like 5, drive like a bat out of hell halfway across Connecticut to say 2 minutes at a meeting.
And potentially get yelled at by people at the meeting.
Right.
And I mean, because that's back in the day, that stuff was like
pretty wild.
It was like the fight scene in Blazing Saddles at the end, to go to one of those meetings, man. Chairs are flying, people are screaming. I mean, who wants to do that? Right.
And I think also, I think it speaks to what I think the real strength of ASGA is how we use that science, but then from there, and data, but from there we work to educate and advocate. Can you just kind of take people through the three-legged stool that we have for
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, we got involved. We wanted false albacore to be managed, and there wasn't enough science on them, and we were called all sorts of, take your pick, how dumb we were. But the reality was that our team saw the writing on the wall for striped bass, and an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And we were like, look, we better stabilize false albacore, because it was always kind of like an up, 1 year they're there, 1 year they're not. It was
a
2
unique
weeks
blank slate, right? It was a blank slate at the
blank,
time.
blank. I could fill a boat up with false albacore until it sunk, and it would be perfectly legal. And there's a whole, like, you can't, my crystal ball sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. But you look at like the status of herring. Menhaden has a cap on harvest in the Atlantic. You have all these forage species that just are not mackerel, all these forage species that are just not available. And then you're like, huh, well, I got this like 5 to 15 pound fish that swims in pretty tight schools and is super oily. Is it really that much of a stretch to think that somebody could start netting these things and selling them for whatever? And there's a huge bait market. They use their belly strips from everything from sharks to Goliath grouper to deep dropping for swordfish to, it's really tough skin. It's really oily meat. And you just don't know like what new market is going to emerge. And for our people from North Carolina to Martha's Vineyard, this is an important fish. Months of, people will be like, no, I do not want to fish for striped bass. I want to go, the albies are around, I want to go for albies. And that's just a cultural thing in those areas. So we tried. We said, hey, look, it's this many trips. This is what's happening. Could you just put guardrail management on? We go to the South Atlantic Council. They say no. We go to ASMFC. They say no. Which, by the way, I might add, like, ASMFC manages spiny dogfish, which are worth, like, after expenses, they're worth 16 cents a pound. And it's like a $4 million fishery. And like one state fishing for albies for a few months squishes that like a bug, and they're like, oh no, we can't manage that.
How many 100,000 trips a year for albies?
Last year was around 500,000.
Yeah. Okay.
As the direct target, like that's my number one target.
Right.
So anywho, so we just kept hitting a wall, and they were like, no, we need science. So we were just like, all right, we'll give you science. We got connected with New England Aquarium. We started doing telemetry work, and it was really, it was kind of like, fake it till you make it. We didn't know about the science, education, advocacy, but as we saw this thing unfold, our community just loved the science aspect of it. They loved getting reports of like, this albie ended up here, this albie ended up there. And then in the process of them eating the science up, they really became knowledgeable. Our community became incredibly knowledgeable about the fishery. And then they were able to, go to individual states and say, well, hey, look, can you just put regulations on this fish because they're really important to us? And that was the ticket. And we didn't realize it, better to be lucky than good. We didn't really realize it at the time, but now we do. That, like, you perform the science, you educate the managers and the public and take them along with you, and then you build an advocate army that's invested in it because they started at ground zero. So we just, our team, and you're obviously on the team. We talk all the time, and we were like, hey, here, this is it. This is the way forward. It lines up exactly with who we are, so
Let's start again.
Yeah, science. You do the science, you educate everyone on the science, and then you have an advocate army that's going to impact the regulations or policy or whatever you want to call it. And as we move along, our advocates become more and more invested in multiple species. They are more
Had
and
a
more
positive impact. You know what I mean? They got to,
well,
they're
that's
like,
and that's the thing, Peter. You get a win. Like, we don't get wins very often.
right.
So, like, we're kind of stacking them up lately, and that's really great for an advocate to be able to say, like, hey, wait a minute, I made a difference. Hey, this stuff does work. Because prior to this, I don't know how many conversations I had in my life where people were like, yeah, I tried that, it didn't work, nobody listened to me, I'll never do that again.
Right. Felt like a waste of time.
Yeah,
I do.
I understand that.
Yeah. When I talk about it, I think of there, like you said, to educate the advocates and the fisheries people. But I also think there's a skill training that happens, because with that education comes confidence. We still got to know how to do it. That's a skill. And we put time into that too. How to go testify, how to write a letter, how to not a cut and paste thing. Here are the talking points. And hell, I think, I've talked about this plenty, is we don't care if you align. We want people in the game.
Yeah.
Engage. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I would tell you, if there's things that you love, whether it's striped bass, albies, or needlepoint, you better be ready to advocate for it. It's just about everything needs a voice, right? And fishermen, as I said earlier, sometimes chop themselves up into these small groups. They read this magazine and they go to that show. These anglers, just as passionate, read this magazine and go to that show. And I think the Guide Association is building a tent where people can be together and work together around a passion that they share for something that's great. But I haven't, that term advocate army is great. So used false albacore as an example. And I know with striped bass, we have a couple things coming up, but the goal would be to rebuild by 2029. And it's a complicated thing. I don't know that we can get into the weeds, but people can certainly learn more on the ASGA website or listening to the podcast. The podcast has been a great. You got a great response to the podcast, right? Over time.
Oh, the guide post has a loyal following, and just some dates for people to think about. So that kind of standalone striper hearing is going to be on December 16th. The technical committee is going to produce the documents, because we needed a little bit of data coming in. And I'm going off memory here, so we'll see how good my memory is. But that technical committee, which is the science group for striped bass, needed wave 4 data, and they're going to post that report, I think, on December 3rd. And then there's going to be a public information webinar on December 5th, where they're going to take that document and go through it. And then
December 9th, I have an AP.
Advisory panel meeting. And then the next day is the deadline for written comments. So we're going to have, that public information webinar. That's where everyone's going to learn what's going on. Yeah. So we're going to have like 5 days.
Yeah.
And then the actual meeting is on the 16th. So, couple of real important, and if I missed anything, nobody get mad at me. I think I got it okay. But yeah, so that's what's coming up on stripers, and I just want to tell your listeners, because I know you have a broad audience, because the Albie project was so successful, and it looks like we're going to get some management on them. We have kind of hit the rinse and repeat button, and we are going to do the same thing for Jack Crevalle. From Charleston, South Carolina to Texas in key points, because same deal. This is a fish that people love. I mean, they fight like a pit bull on crack. They have zero table fare quality, and these people are just killing them for shark bait. And that's just stupid. Because Peter, I remember when you went to where'd you go? Cosmoloto, and you got stuck in a storm and screwed over.
I get to Cosmoloto. I was at Farquhar, but I get you.
Yeah, you went like halfway around the world to have like a margarita, and like you can go and catch the same damn fish in Charleston Harbor and Stewart and New Orleans. It's the same thing. They don't get quite as big as a GT, but I promise you this, you're not going to catch 5 GT in
Right.
the Seychelles or the Cosmolotos. You can get like 3 shots in a week. And I promise you another thing too, after you catch your third or fourth one in New Orleans, you're gonna be like, I'm good. I don't want to catch another one of these.
Yeah.
Like this
They
thing just
wouldn't. Yeah.
beat me like a rented mule. Like, get me out of here. So like why do we place okay. Here's just a philosophical question.
Sure.
Why do we care so much about stuff that has a food value when the real economic value is in the recreational fishery where people can choose whether to kill the fish or let it go?
Right.
Like, why is that why is management on saltwater fish back in like the 1970s?
Yeah.
That's the real problem.
Yeah. I've always kind of thought part of the reason was that the commercial interests have been there for a very long time, and they're well seated, and they're expected to, and they have a pretty consistent point of view. The recreational groups haven't had the horsepower and the legs. They've had the
Peter,
economic weight.
I was at a meeting in DC recently,
Uh-huh.
and there was an Alaskan fisherman sitting next to me at dinner table. And they turned around and looked at me and said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I told them what I did. And they turned around and they said, "Are you one of those people that lets fish go?" I was like, "Well, yeah, but some of the time, like some of the time I kill them, some of the time I let them go." And they were like, "Oh, well, you know, you're negatively impacting my gillnet fishery." And I'm just sitting there like I was waiting for like the camera to pop out and like all y'all to come out laughing. I'm like, am I being tested by God right now? Like to hold my shit together, in this meeting in DC? Like, is that really what's happening right now? And I somehow found the patience inside of me and really didn't say anything, but I was just kind of like, oh, I'm sorry that I'm letting fish go that could have ended up in your gill net. How selfish of me, like, yeah, my apologies,
Sure, yeah.
to whatever you do. But yeah, I mean, people, it's wild. Like I've said this a couple times on our podcast, but you have like kayak fishermen
Mm-hmm.
on the Susquehanna River. Stripers are completely in the dumpster, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone knows that. And I'm not arguing that anymore. And they're sitting there and they're fishing in an area that has both smallmouth bass and striped bass, that brackish water thing where they can all live together.
Yeah.
And they'll put a picture up and be like, "Oh, look at this 5-pound smallie! I let it go and it lived." And then they catch a 20-something inch striper, clunk it on the head, and put it on a stringer. Now, this is incredibly ironic because smallmouth bass are not native to our region. They are not native to the Susquehanna River.
Mm.
So for some weird thing, it's that freshwater saltwater thing. You have
Sure.
it basically essentially an invasive species that over time people have embraced, a smallmouth bass for the Susquehanna River. And
Sure.
everyone right now is Googling if smallmouth bass are native. They are not. Go to USGS, go
Yeah.
type in USGS into Google and type in smallmouth native range. They are not. They are in the Ohio River Valley. They
Oh,
are not from the Susquehanna River. They are invasive. But it's just the point of this mentality
reality.
that, like, one's a freshwater fish, so you have to protect it and let it go. And then saltwater means an endless cornucopia. And
Right.
you're just like, what is happening? Like, am I in bizarro world? Like, clunk the stupid smallmouth on the head.
Right.
It's not from here,
Right.
you know? It's
The
crazy.
So I know, and we're going to start a wrap up here, but on there's the economic impact. We're working on understanding that in a couple of different species, but I think you had some good info on was it Louisiana redfish? Maybe wasn't there one of them?
Yeah, so
Um,
we did a survey, scientific survey,
mhm.
approved by
A bit
all the
bigger.
all the big people who would accept it. And we did a survey on angler expenditures, and basically the translation on that is, when an angler comes, because Louisiana is without a doubt, the most popular destination. It's, probably neck and neck with the Florida Keys for tarpon, bonefish, but for, for redfish and speckled trout and everything else, Louisiana is one of the last destination fisheries in saltwater in the U.S. So we really wanted to understand, with the decline of redfish in Louisiana, we wanted to understand what economic value, to kind of show the state of Louisiana, like, you don't understand, this is what you got, right? So we did a survey for a while. We got a ton of input from our guides in Louisiana and their clients. And basically this is what it worked out to. And this is based on, they have a very long season there. This is based on 200 trips a year, and most of our guys do way more than that. They could work, if the weather was consistent, and they wanted to work themselves into a grave, they could do 365 days a year. Like, the season never ends in Louisiana. So this was based off 200 days a year. And it's about, each guide contributes in angler expenditures about $450,000 a year to the state of Louisiana. And when you add all that up, it's like a $350 million fishery. So this would include, like, how much did you pay for your plane? How much did you pay for your hotel? How much was the equipment that you bought? How much did you tip your guide? What was the rental car? All the expenditures that went into that fishing trip.
And assuming the guy did 200 days, not the many more that they do.
Oh yeah, no, we have, those boys. That's we didn't want anything to seem like we were exaggerating.
Yeah, I got it.
So a $350 million fishery, and what they found was, because the redfish population was depressed, the state of Louisiana is losing like $30-40 million a year in angler expenditures, because there's not as many fishing trips, because there's not as many redfish. At the time, the stock assessment said at the high point there was like 21 million redfish in Louisiana, and that baseline year, I think, was 2021 for the stock assessment, and there was like just under 9 million fish. So you talk about over a 50% reduction in the fish availability. And people are still going there, the fishing's still great, but it's not what it was. The fish are getting spookier. Schools of 40 are now down to schools of 5. A lot of questions. And it's so similar to striped bass, because we advocate for that. And then, well, it's the marsh, it's the land eroding, it's the runoff from the Mississippi River, it's the dead zones, it's this, it's that, it's the other. Well, okay. Louisiana has billions of dollars to repair the marsh. Like, what do you want us to do about it? You have a lever to pull. Do you need to be killing 5 redfish a day per person, with one giant redfish included in that? You absolutely do not. And that's what happened. There's no commercial fishery in Louisiana, none. So that resonated pretty strong with managers. That was kind of eye-popping. Thanks to Ben Meadows, professor at University of Alabama, Birmingham, who took this on. And right now, Peter, like, I'm not afraid to put this out there, but we have a couple of students and Dr. Meadows working on what is the value of an individual striped bass to the economy. So that's like that's like what BTT did for bonefish. And it's going to take a little bit of time, but it's going to come out, and it's going to be ironclad, and we're going to be able to put that on people's desks. And we never really want anything managed just for the economics. There are other factors that need to go in, like the health of the resource, and what anglers want out of the fishery. But that economic metric, what is one striped bass that is caught and released worth versus one that ends up in a gill net or in a cooler. And that should be part of the decision matrix for managers. Not all of it. We don't want it to be all of it. It shouldn't be all of it, but it should be a function, and it's been lacking for a very long time, because it's real.
Right.
People's jobs depend on it. It's real.
managing to abundance has a bunch of benefits, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like you just kind of outlined them. And I do believe that people, passionate fishermen might shift their effort to something else if they don't think they're going to catch, the prospect of catching a fish isn't there, right?
Oh yeah.
But, and so maybe I'd ask you, I said 3 things. Now there's 4. I want to see that arm tattoo.
Which one? I got like 8.
Yeah, I know the recent vintage.
Oh.
And that is?
So it's just, I love that worm pattern on albies. I just love it more than anything. So I had there's a funny story. Like, I've got a real good tattoo place around here. And I think anytime they have a cancellation, they just give me a call. And I had been, man, what's that song by the Dropkick Murphys?
Moving up to Boston?
No, it's Rose. No, no. That I'm not a fan of that one. But it's it's the what is it? Rose tattoo. You know what I mean? I have these tattoos so I don't get lonely. So like, you just every single one of them means something.
Yeah.
And I figured, I've spent the last 3 or 4 years of my life trying to get these stupid things saved, so so people could keep their businesses running during the downturn in stripers. And I just love that worm pattern. So it's just, realistic tail and then that worm pattern. And nobody will really know what it is unless they like catching albies.
If you know, you know.
Yeah, if you know, you know. If not, it looks stupid. That's okay. I'm fine with either one of those things. So
let's tell me how folks best join this advocate army that we're building.
Yeah, it's super easy, right? Obviously our blogs, we're coming out with an educational series of blogs right now that are, why do we tag fish? How to be a good advocate, how to give a good comment. All kind of the building blocks to give people confidence and experience to go on and write a comment or hop on a webinar and give a public comment live. Those aren't easy things to do, but doing that first one, that gets you the experience to give you more confidence moving forward. So what we're trying to do is develop people. And Peter, like you said, I mean, what if for anyone listening to this podcast, if y'all have been on any ASMFC meetings, you have heard some of the most batshit lunatic comments from like, they're eating all the stripers are eating all the crabs. Excuse me. Stripers are eating all the crabs. This is the best striper fishing I've ever seen. A dead fish today is worth more than a dead fish 4 years ago. Like, just patently idiotic, non-accurate statements. And the more level-headed, educated statements that we can say, the more batshit crazy you make those people look like.
Yeah.
So you are making a difference.
What's the reason?
Yeah. So, for all those people that say it's not worth it. Now, look, man, I got a family. If you don't have time, that's okay. But if you want to follow, like, read our blogs, look at our social media, learn a little bit about the science. If you don't like the policy and the advocacy and that scares you, at least learn about the science of the fish. That's cool, right?
You can be informed talking to your peers. Maybe you persuade people on the way.
And whatever you hear, no offense, because I'm doing a podcast with somebody who owns one. Besides like Saltwater Edge and a handful of other places, do not listen to the person behind the counter at a tackle shop because they do not know what they are talking about. Trust me. Like, Blaine sent me one of those funny videos and it's a guy with his eyes rolling. And the caption is, when you've studied something for 30 years and somebody's talking about it and you're trying to keep your mouth shut. You know what I mean? It's like a doctor at a party and somebody's talking about like some doctor conspiracy and they're just like, get me out of here. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not opening my mouth. I'm just, get me out of here. So, learn what you want to learn what you're passionate about. And we have ways to digest it. We have the Guidepost podcast. We have instructional videos on YouTube. We
Yeah,
have
blog posts.
the blogs on our website, and pick it apart and learn from it and take what you want from it. And you don't have to agree with us. If you come to a different conclusion, that's fine. At least you elevated your knowledge a little bit. That's
Right.
okay. Like, it's okay. I don't hate you because you feel different. I will kick your ass in the policy world, so just get used to that. But like, I'm just kidding. Look, I'm a smart aleck, you know what I mean? Like, that's just who I am. But like, no, seriously, like, if you don't come to the same conclusions, that's fine. Have a discussion with us in
I
an
think
open forum.
that's the way I describe it. Is we're in the business, if you will, of creating advocates.
Yeah.
We can't create them all in our likeness, if you will, like they share, the policy directives, the Guide Association word for word. But it's a great place to get a science-based fish first opinion.
Yeah, what I'll tell everyone, because y'all have like the surf casting community, the small boat community, guide community. We have all of these things. This is a New England-based podcast. Well, what I'm going to tell you is this about stripers, and you can believe me or you cannot believe me. It's okay. But I'm going to tell you this: it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
Going to get worse before it gets better, and we're going to have to make some hard choices, moving forward. The last thing that we want at the Guides Association, even though people are saying the opposite, on podcasts and videos and stuff, like, we have never once called for a harvest moratorium. Not once. We did call for seasonal closures, and a lot of people freaked out over that, but I think that's just a thing about the terminology. So a seasonal closure is a harvest closure. It's not a targeting closure. You can still go fishing, and it's going to be for like 2 to 4 weeks in the year. Some states have like open season year round, other states don't. So they're trying to kind of, and then you have a state like Maine that only has like a 90, 100-day season versus a state like New Jersey where people are, fishing 10 months out of the year. So there's a lot of disparity, and to kind of level.
You only have 3 levers, right? It's length,
Yeah,
season, and
yeah,
number, right?
yeah,
So it's got to, the other 2
yeah.
are
So
table.
yeah,
Leaving.
and Peter, the thing is, that's not a moratorium.
Right. Yeah.
That's not like you can't keep a fish ever. That's like a small closure for a window that's, anywhere from 2 to probably 4 weeks, where you just can't possess the fish, but you can go out. And so like the economy can still chug on. It's the no targeting closures that we're totally opposed to. And that isn't because the negative thing that we've heard about that is like, oh, they just want to do it that way. They're catch and release guys and they want to take from everyone else and Well, no, absolutely not. Like, we have never drawn the line saying you can't take a fish home. Okay. Not once. Look at everything we've ever written. But if you have a choice of not being able to go out at all, or just not be able to possess a fish,
Right.
if you're so spiteful that you think that catch and release people cause this problem, that you're just like, no, we can't even target, you're our enemy. Because that kills the economy. That kills the mom and pops, the sandwich shops, the hotels, Airbnbs, everything. You are anti-economy. You may not like us because we, by and large, don't fill the cooler, and that's your business model. That's not my problem. But the stock has gotten to a point where we're going to have to start making decisions like that. And our decisions are going to be, if the stock is healthy enough to target the fish, that we got to keep this economy rolling. And there's a million different reasons why. A dad or a mom that wants to take their kids fishing, and then all this, that's their 4 days that they can go to the beach, and they're blue collar people, and they don't get a month off. They get 2 weeks off, and you picked the wrong 2 weeks, and you want to take your kids to the beach and you can't even do it. Bullshit.
Right.
I mean, bullshit. Like, at least let the kid have a chance to throw a line out on Cape Cod and reel a fish in, and not be like, oh, Jesus, what day is it on the calendar? I'm not allowed to fish. If you support that, we are not on the same side.
Right. Not on the same page.
We're not on the same side. Like, you are a selfish, vindictful, individual who punitively wants to hurt the catch and release community for no other reason than you're a dick. So, I mean, I don't really know how else to put it.
Right.
So,
Well, I
there's
appreciate
because that impacts a lot of people, man, and
absolutely. And I
there's no
think
fairness in it.
I know people can't read your hat. I know that it says better business through conservation. Yes. And that what you just articulated certainly syncs up with that, which is one of the fundamental premises of the Guide Association for sure.
Yeah.
Last question. You have one day left on Earth. Where are you going to fish and for what? And with who? If there's a who.
So I know you were going to ask me this, and that the short answer is just anywhere with my son.
Yeah.
I don't care. It'd be the farm pond across the street. But if if I could like knock it out of the park and it was truly anywhere and I could be a little selfish, and I guess
Yeah.
I'm inferring that I wouldn't have to work for the Guides Association on that day.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any other responsibilities. So
Off,
we check all those boxes. The coolest place that I've ever been is Carpentaria in Australia.
Oh, wow.
Which is, not too far from Burma. It's in that northern area. Probably the closest place that would be considered a city is Darwin.
Okay.
And I was there for a little bit in my 20s, and I just remember, I never saw more stars. And the only time I ever saw more stars in the sky is when I was like way offshore in Hawaii. I never seen anything like that. I mean, it was a totally different perspective on the earth. You're just like, holy mackerel, I'm on this little ball hurtling through space. It looked like it looked like a windshield when it's snowing outside. Like that's how many stars there were. And I got that same feeling in Carpentaria, where it was Carpentaria Bay, where it was just, I mean, I was just catching like these giant fish, and I didn't even know what they were. I mean, I had no idea what they were. I had like nothing on me. It was before cell phones. It was, I mean, and there's a real, maybe there'll be time for it another day, but I almost got eaten by a crocodile. Like, I mean, it was a huge shark right where I was standing before. And I'm like, holy Jesus, like, man, something gets me here. Like they're not even going to know. Nobody's ever going to know what happened.
Right.
But it was just one of the wildest places I've ever been on earth.
Awesome.
And like, I wouldn't want to take my son there because he could catch a big fish. I'd want to take him there so he could see what stuff should really be like,
What the wild looks like.
and take that into his life,
Yeah.
and just kind of have that as a memory. So if I could walk that beach again, that'd be pretty cool with my boy.
That's great. Well, certainly do appreciate your time here, Tony, and especially the work that you do. And I'm glad we got together to sort of share with this audience what the Guide Association. I know there's a lot of overlap, but I think we're really working here to build a bigger tent and to create that advocate army. And striped bass need them, false albacore need them, redfish need them, jacks need them. And I mean, we got to start saying no, because that's already, we're getting pulled in every which way direction. But, I do feel like there's a real alignment between with the recreational angler and what makes sense, and that fish first focus that you've pursued from the get-go, that you conceived of back in the day, is starting to have real positive impact. So thank you for bringing me along as well. All right.
Well, Peter, I think what we're all, it had nothing to do with me, right? I mean, I've been doing this stuff a long time, and we have the best team, ever assembled. It's basically like the equivalent of the Avengers, or like, I mean, it's wild, when you see how talented people are in certain aspects, you included. And this isn't about any of us. Like, we want to build this for the future. I'm trying my best to build this association. We talk about it all the time. If somebody gets hit by a bus, who takes over? It's not about us. It's not about the individuals. It's about building something that people can hang on to. There's no ego. There's no egos in this association anymore. Haha. And And you know, it's something really special. And my message to anyone listen to this is we want you to be a part of it.
Yeah.
We
Join the
want you to
army.
be we want you to be a part of it.
Yeah. Excellent. Well,
That's
Tony,
why we're
thanks.
building it.
Thanks
You know?
again. And no doubt we'll probably talk after the NOAA meeting this afternoon.
Oh yeah, let me know how that goes.
Take it easy.
There's some zingers in there that I sent for you. Take it easy, buddy.
I'm about to print it out and get in the car. So good stuff. Thanks,
All
man.
right, buddy. Have a good day.
Well.